Hi, everybody. We're back again with the Black Lawyers Podcast. I have the pleasure of interviewing Derrick from Florida A&M University. He's a 2L. And for once, I'm going to be in the hot seat. He's going to be interviewing me today, as well as me interviewing him about his experience as a Black student at Florida A&M, just being a Black student in general, being in law school. So excited to hear his perspective, his feedback. But before we get into those questions, we want to discuss our hot topics. So Derrick, I'm sure you follow all the trending news. One of the big stories, there are a lot of divorce stories, there are a lot of child support stories, but one that kind of really came to the forefront was Rick Ross. Rick Ross has many children, if you don't know this, but he specifically has 3 children by this particular model, who at first he didn't want to claim paternity. He finally got over that. And then he actually just agreed to finally just give her, the court awarded her $11,000 in child support a month. And a lot of times I tell people it's not rocket science, right? Each state has a calculator. How many days you spend with the child, they input it into the calculator, how much the person makes, they just put it in, and just whatever that number is that comes out, that's what you have to pay, unless obviously you just want to pay more. So I don't want to say the backlash, but the controversy was that she only made like $147 a month when they looked at the documents. And so people are just kind of like, I know children's, not tuition, what do you call it? Allowances that are more than $147 a month. So, I guess the backlash is, should women be allowed to just kind of sit up here and have all these kids and not be made to at least make an effort to create income for themselves? Should they just be allowed to rely on these high wealth individuals? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think it's a phenomenal question. And particularly with the way you framed it, the first thing that comes to mind is women's autonomy, bodily autonomy. So when you say, should women be allowed to sit up and have children by these high net worth individuals, I think what's key in there is the woman's choice. Now, naturally, when a woman decides to have children, she's hopefully deciding to have them in contingency with the father or the would-be father. However, that always isn't the case. So first off, we see that women deal with societal pressure in general, despite their race. There are many different forces that kind of influence their decision-making process and their thinking process when it comes to what they should decide to do. To be completely honest, I think it is the woman's liberty to choose what she wants to do. Now, should we mandate that women pursue job opportunities to kind of offset these otherwise excessively burdensome costs on the father if they decide to have 1,000,001 children and not do anything? No, I don't think we should mandate that, because again, it goes back to the individual's choice. I mean, women fundamentally have unequal bargaining power in the United States. So we talk about what a woman can and cannot do in terms of trying to contract for a job. Despite many attempts to equalize pay and have hurdles that women have to cross that some men just don't have to on the basis of their sex. So when we talk about the dollar amount of the woman in your scenario only getting $147 a month,
which I don't even know how, I'll be honest, I don't even know how they came to that number, because obviously they calculate somehow that was her only income. And again, I don't even know what that could even be from, because I'm like, unemployment I think is at least a couple $100s a week. So yeah, however they came to the number, it was 147. And I think, I'll be honest, I think that's why the story became trending, because it's like
trending, right? Because it's like you can even, it's hard to live off of Social Security, so let alone $147,000 a month. I think fundamentally if we address the question of should we mandate that women work if they're in this situation, it goes to this say, who controls the woman's body? In this day and age, she has the freedom to do what she wants to do. And if she is making the decision in light of the man who would be providing for her, I mean, you have to employ some kind of relationship ethics now. Like, you knew that you were going to have a wife or a girlfriend who's going to bear you children,
and probably wasn't really working. already when you met her. I mean,
Exactly.
but here's the thing, I will play devil's advocate. I did family law for some time in the beginning of my career, and I helped a lot of people, but I got out of it because it was very stressful. Devil's advocate, there are judges that will mandate that, because a guy will come in and say, let's say it's the other way around. The guy will come in and say, I don't really have anything, Your Honor. I'm not really working, so I can't give her anything. And the judge will be like, well, you have 30 days to find a job, or you have 60 days to find a job. So, yeah. So with that being said, you want to, hold on, let's take a break because I know.
Right.
Is the light going to come back
Yeah,
on?
the light. Right. Apologies. No, it's like the motion light. Let me see if I can get up. There we are.
There we go. If
It's
you're
like
if you're watching us, yes, he's in a beautiful classroom for his background. I know some of us will be watching this versus just listening to this. So no, I was just saying that just playing devil's advocate, that again, sometimes judges are like, well, you're gonna have to find a job because I'm not gonna just let you say I'm unemployed, Your Honor, so I can't bring it. So I don't know. I do think, and this is in one case, I do think that women actually have the heads up. And I was talking about that in another context, not so much child support, that women do and family law are just preferred. And I think it's because they're the mother of the children. I think there's a preference there, a unstated bias. So anyway, I think, like I said, it seems like he was all on board. It didn't seem like he fought it. I think at some level, why fight it when you already knew she didn't really have any money? It takes two to tango. You knew she was having the kids. So
Right.
you're a
And men try to fight
multi-millionaire.
on principles.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it would have been silly because he's also paying for, the kids' insurance, extracurricular activities, and her legal fees. He agreed to do all of it. So, kudos to him for closing this out, not making it messy, and wanting to support the mother, this, three very, very small children. Anyway, so next up, so we have Henrietta Lacks, who in the audience, if you're listening, if you're not familiar, was a woman whose cells were essentially taken from her without her permission during a study while she was admitted in a hospital. And her cells have basically led to medicines with AIDS, medicines with cancer, stem cell research. I mean, there's so many things that if we didn't have her cells, we wouldn't have certain medical advancements to this day in medicine. Yet her family has never been compensated. There's never been a discussion about, giving them any real, credit, even though they call it, I think it's called like the H cell, or, I think the initials of the cells that are used are named after her, but there's just never been any compensation, long story short. And so now they have Ben Crump's attorney representing the family. What are your thoughts on how they can make this right? Because it's been so long. I don't even know how can you calculate somebody whose cells like basically help with cancer and AIDS? At this point, it could be millions, it could be billions. I don't even, where do you think would be a good starting place for the pharmaceutical company to compensate the family?
Absolutely. So I think, so two parts. I think there needs to be some kind of political compensation. I think, when you go back in the history, especially when you're talking about the experimentation on Black people for the advancement of the American medical community, I think to a certain degree, finances just can't do it. You have to put something in legislation that furthers the ball in the future for not just people in general, but marginalized individuals in particular. So, so that's the first place I would start. Secondly, given that the family is bringing this into contest now, I think you can't help but have some kind of compensable injuries for the family that needs to be awarded. And so again, with the question that you framed, my immediate thought is towards. Luckily, I took that last year, so now I have a little bit of grasp on that.
Consider what is that, assault or battery?
Yeah, right, exactly. You have all, if we want to throw the book at that, we can find every kind of legal issue in the law school sense to stick them with. But, I think you have to think about, what was the standard of care that was owed to Henrietta Lacks? What is the standard of care that was owed to her as a patient in terms of her signing away, like, I guess, her bodily integrity for these cells to be experimented on. There's case law where literally in the past, and I want to say there's a case law that comes out of California that talks about, when someone's biological material is used for extra reasons beyond those circumstances that he allotted or gave permission for. And I think, that is essentially the central question with Miss Lax. And it just evolves into the standard of care, the duty to care, the breach of contract or breach of care that she should have expected, any compensable damages that she's entitled to, and any causes that result from not only her being experimented on, but anything that resulted after the fact, the continuing development of different medical care on the basis of her genetic material. And so I couldn't tell you how much I think they should be awarded, but I definitely think both political and financial compensation should be assigned to the family and the African-American race as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I don't know what the dollar amount obviously would be. Obviously, it's probably going to be somewhere in the millions, but there should be some sort of calculation that both parties can come to, because this doesn't really need to go to trial. This needs to settle. And I think with them having then Crump on their side, they can actually probably settle this. And I have to look back, but it's crazy how this story actually relates to me. I don't know if it was a family member or a friend of a family member many, many, many years ago. Had sent my firm or sent an email about this very same issue that they still were considering. And at the time, I think we initially connected, but we didn't really follow up again. So it's funny that they, still many years later, they figured out a way to still move forward with this. And so I wish them well. I mean, I think it goes beyond saying that, this may not have even been negligence. This may have just been an intentional tort. Like they intentionally knew they were doing something without someone's permission and they just did it anyway, right? So it should be interesting how this comes down. I don't think there's going to be any sort of trial. I think they're going to settle this because in this political climate, this is not the climate where you want to drag this in front of a child, because the public jury will hang you before you get in front of the actual jury, as in many of the cases that we've seen recently. So yeah, I don't think they want to take this to trial. So we wish that family the best. I definitely here at the Black Lawyers Podcast, we'll be following that story. Which leads us to our final story, Dave Chapelle, our good old buddy Dave Chapelle. I'm from DC, so I love Dave Chapelle. And I love that his last special, or at least for now, his last special for Netflix really focused on the LGBTQ community, and how he's like, I just want to use this special to clear up. Yes, I've made jokes, but one of my closest friends was transgender, and passed away. And I have he has a trust for his transgender friend's child. So when she becomes 18, she'll get access to the money. So he's like, I love everybody, If anything, I got issues with the whites, but I do not have issues with the LGBTQ. So he's like, if you listen closely, I have an issue with white people. I don't have an issue with LGBTQ. Y'all are not listening to my special. So I love how he at least attempted to clear the air with the community. I love, he said something else really cool. He said, love is not gay, love is not straight, it's bisexual. It has to go both ways. I thought that was a really interesting way to think about it, because yeah, it does have to go both ways. So what are your thoughts in terms of the news? So he was in the news, but as it ties to the law, there was, I guess, a employee at Netflix that, still didn't like the special, even with his explanation, still didn't like the special, and made some comments on Twitter. And so that Netflix employee allegedly was not suspended for their comments, but they had done some other things at Netflix that were inappropriate. And so, but everybody's like, but the timing is so suspicious. Like, they do these comments about Dave, and then coincidentally, you were getting ready to suspend them for something else anyway. Well, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know how much you know about this story.
Right. So understanding the duality that Dave Chappelle has, not only as a Black man, but as a heterosexual Black man. I think that it's important to realize that on that stage, he's both a comedian and person. And while we have to take what he is saying with a grain of salt, still that understanding does not absolve him from the reality that he's hurting people's feelings. So we have to just acknowledge that in that comedic performance, he's also having a relationship with his audience. So that's number one. Number two, I wasn't quite sure if the employee at Netflix was either suspended or fired, but nonetheless to be, I guess, I'll say allegedly temporarily let go
Right.
on the basis of their tweets. That might have just been the fire that that might have been the fire that needed to give them the ultimate boot, essentially. So from the public perspective, I think that in the LGBT community, we have to acknowledge that this is still a work in progress, how the world sees the LGBT community, how people are understanding or coming to terms with how someone psychologically identifies and what that means emotionally for them, what that looks like expressively for them. And I think we have to also get to the point where the heterosexual community has to understand that how an LGBT person perceives themselves and eventually comes to express themselves is not at the expense of their identity.
Right.
It's not at the expense at their potential sexual activity with that individual.
Right.
And so
it's like, I'm doing me, you do you.
Exactly. But I think also too, people, whether on both sides of the spectrum, I think people still deal with this idea of attraction. Oh, I think I'm attracted, but if they don't, now I'm threatened by that reality. Or if they are, and I don't go that way, I'm still threatened. So it's like you're threatened or you're still threatened. It's that imbalance.
Like you can't win, right?
I'm going to call it completely a sexual narcissism. I mean, it's just this idea that you can't get around yourself, but for someone else. And so I hope I'm answering your question. I think the dialogue with, as it pertains to the employee at Netflix, I have some friends who work at Netflix, and the culture at Netflix is completely different than what maybe some people would expect. Despite being film production company, I think there's a certain ethos that Netflix expects of its employees 9 to 5 and even after 9 to 5. So I think that goes on with the political behavior that happens for the company to make the company what it is. It's a machine. It's like any other major corporation, it's a machine. And so there's a certain expectation on the professionalism that person is supposed to expect or deliver on a day-to-day basis. Even if that extends to their social media activity, that goes to say, no matter where you work, don't share your social media unless you trust your employees or your coworkers.
Well, I think there's a running meme on social media with lawyers, and it says, I think the original meme was like, dance like no one's watching or something. So it's like dance like no one's watching, but write, but write your email or write your social media tweet, as if it can be read in an open court deposition, right? That's how you need to write it, as if it could be read in a court deposition. If you're okay with it being read in a court deposition, then that should be your indicator that it's okay to send. And so, with this younger generation of law students, and a lot of times people don't even put their real name on the social media because they're like, I need a burner account because I want to say what I want to say, because I want to still get a job after law school, but I still what I want to say. So people create secondary accounts that don't even have like either their picture or it doesn't have their real name, because they still, and it says like you still want to say what you want to say. There is like you said, there is that right to freedom of speech, which Netflix encourages, but it still has to be in the context of a certain level of professionalism and things that, again, when you sign up to work for that company, you agree to a certain code of conduct. So it's not even about free speech anymore. It's more of a contractual issue that you agree to. So with that being said, like I said, I believe the person wasn't fired. I believe it was just a suspension. So hopefully that person will, I don't know if they're going to decide to return or not. But I think it went viral just because the timing of it seems suspicious, that they did this tweet
Right.
about Dave Chappelle, and then all of a sudden they were getting suspended about something else anyway.
Right.
So yeah, it's very interesting. Dave Chappelle at this point walked away from $50 million. Anybody can walk away.
I mean, he got paid
He's
at the
so
end of the day.
unbothered. Yeah, I think Dave
Right.
Chappelle will be okay. Anybody that can
Right.
walk away from $50 million, I think is very unbothered.
Right.
With that said, being said, I want to transition into the interview portion. In the audience, for those of you who don't know, Derrick actually is our scholarship recipient, our first one. In our annual scholarship, we do a book or bar exam scholarship for students. And so really excited to awarded him this scholarship. We're encouraging everyone to apply for next year. We usually do it during Black History Month. So that'll be in February. We'll probably have some initial details posted in January. But yeah, so you are our first hopefully of many. We're hoping to, obviously even maybe award multiple scholarships in the future. So, you have a scholarship, you're in school, you mentioned that you're at Florida A&M. Tell us why you wanted to attend law school in the first place, because you're just so fabulous. You said you did journalism and other things. I was like, he could be so many other things, right? Not that you would be a great lawyer, but why? So why law school for you?
Right, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I'm so honored to have awarded the scholarship. It means a lot to me in many different ways. But to answer your question, as cliche as it sounds, I was born to have a calling as a lawyer. I was one of those students to be, and it's, everything that they tell you in OC on-campus interviews, do not say that this was the only thing that you do for your life. Like, unfortunately, I'm one of those people. So I came out in the world and I was like, I want to be a lawyer. Didn't know what kind of lawyer I wanted to be, but that was always on my tongue. And so I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. for undergrad. Thank you. And loved it. I went there with a headstrong focus on being a political science and economics double major. Did that for 4 years. And then I said, I don't know if I'm ready to go to law school because I don't know if I'm ready for the financial aspect of it. And at the time I was interning on Capitol Hill in finance, and my employers were telling me, it's not the end of the world if you don't go to law school right away. And particularly I was working in capital markets, and I guess for the lack of better words, I was working for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and we were a part of the Troubled Asset Relief Program in complex financial institutions. So basically what that means is that when it was coming to all the banks and all the bailouts that were happening in America post the Great Recession, between the US Treasury and the FDIC, the government was stabilizing the economy. And so I got to really see from a special perspective, how the US economy stays afloat and what the economy values in terms of currency and assets. And I learned, wow, money is not, like, dollar bill is not what keeps everything up. There are tangible objects that have asset values on them. And so I applied to Parsons School of Design for my master's degree program after learning about, they had a program with the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. And I could learn about the fascinating world of objects and appraisal values in the nation's attic. And so that kind of led me to go to Parsons. So while I was at Parsons, I'm still thinking I want to be a lawyer, but how do I use this time and leverage it to my best advantage? And the fashion world just swallows me up, to be completely honest. I immediately went into the fashion world, had all of the PR, editorial, marketing, branding experience. The first job I had in New York was at Stella McCartney in the press office. And then I went over to DNA Model Management and Models.com, where I was getting editorial experience and art department experience. That led me to be at Document Journal and Parkway Entertainment. And then I was just like in this whirlwind of like music.
Right, you were just like fashion, journalism, that was your world for a minute.
All of it in New York City. So who doesn't love that?
Right.
And so when I graduated and finished my work in New York, I came back home and I was like, okay, am I going to be a full-time freelancer and work on different creative projects, or am I going to follow my passion? And I realized that I could actually reconcile fashion, art, music, all of that with the law. And my particular experience and perspective in that fashion world, and then my experience at Howard allowed me to see that, this economy thing is bigger than what I thought it was at first. And so coming to law school gave me the understanding that I could still fulfill my life's calling, or at least what I think my life's calling is. But life and growing up gave me a focus and a specialization. Rather than having the reverse, coming to law school first and then finding my focus, it was kind of like I found my focus and then I'm stepping into my calling.
Which I think is actually amazing, because a lot of times people, maybe they'll go to school and then 3 years later they still don't know which niche, and then they just settle for any sort of job right out of law school because they still don't know.
Right.
Which again, I don't think there's any thing wrong with exploring. I think
Right.
I've done all areas of law at this point in my career, just to figure out where I wanted to settle. But what I will say is, gosh, you just sound like me like 10 years ago, because people would always try to force me, to choose. Like,
Mhm.
you can't be this lawyer and be interested in like the arts and entertainment. I'm like, why not? Why can't I be
Right.
interested? But like, it was always like trying to force me to choose. And so
Right.
I found with becoming, an IP attorney or entertainment attorney, that was the way that I could kind of merge, both of these worlds. And so I'm sure you'll have much success doing that for yourself
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So tell me, what has been your favorite class so far and your least favorite class so
Oh,
far?
wow. I don't even, can that question be asked in law school?
I mean, I'm sure there's a class that's so, I mean, you're in your second year, so you have more left.
Right.
So I'm sure there's
Right.
more classes you're more leaning towards.
Right. So I think, so constitutional law, I'm loving, to be completely honest. And I'm
Okay.
particularly loving the second half of constitutional law where we're getting into the types of standard that the court uses for discrimination and
Okay.
contracts laws and all that kind of stuff. Torts is also exciting too. And so just understanding how we provide remedy to people who have been injured, like that's just, to me, that's fascinating. It probably doesn't help that I also have an internship at a law firm doing this stuff, but
Right.
it's probably between torts and constitutional law, rather. I'm sorry,
What would
constitutional
you say?
law.
And then
Mhm.
what would you say is like so far that's maybe been the most challenging or more difficult course to kind of like really get underneath your belt?
Hmm. Probably contracts, to be completely honest.
To say, okay.
Yeah, it's probably contracts. And I think, and law school is special because a lot of it is to the professor's discretion as to how they decide what may be more rewarding topics or concepts to discuss on an exam versus what another professor might think. And so while the law, in my opinion, for contracts is probably more accessible than any of the other topics I am studying, I think the way contracts can be tested kind of makes it a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more complex.
Yeah, definitely. Depending on the scenario, you take one little
Mhm.
element and it'll completely change the
Right.
result. Definitely, definitely. Um, and then in terms of, and I'm going to at some point, I don't know if it's going to be a podcast or a future episode in the upcoming seasons of the Black Lawyer podcast. But I want to kind of discuss with you your um, Black law student experience
Mm.
versus like the PWI. For if you're in the audience, PWI is predominantly white institution. So, because I have some friends that are like, okay, I'll go to like a Howard or Spelman undergrad, but I'm going to go to a PWI for my law school, or it's the other way around. Maybe undergrad, they had the PWI experience, and then they say, I'll go to, I want to have the HBCU. So you're having the HBCU experience all the way across the board,
Right.
both undergrad and law school. Can you tell us more about
Mhm.
that choice and why you felt like it was important to maybe stick with the HBCU route versus the PWI route?
Right. So I think I have a special circumstance. So I'll take you back to high school just a little bit. So in high school, I had the good fortune of going to college a little bit early and doing a summer program. So it was my summer going into my senior year. I was admitted into Harvard College for the secondary school program. And so there I was able to study American foreign policy and English language and literature. And so that was my first like foray into college life. I was like 16 years old. And so that kind of shaped my college application process. And then my decision to go to Howard was purely on the basis of academics and what I thought I was wanting out of a academic career. And Howard across the board said, what do you want to study? And beyond just the majors, who do you want to study under in the types of content that you want to understand? And how do you see that content being applicable to a potential professional life? Like Howard was taking me through this very intentional discovery of what I wanted my immediate future to be like. Also to the extent of saying, if you were to come to DC, you have the opportunity to intern and receive credit for internships. I mean, the opportunity for just expansion was so obvious at Howard. And so I heard the call and I answered it. And I love that I chose Howard because there is just a certain level of freedom that I think I needed in terms of learning who I am as an individual, as a personality, that I think I probably would not have gotten if I went to a PWI. That's not to say that all Black students who go to PWIs don't have that freedom or mobility in their self-expression, but I think there's something critical about going where you are loved and loved from the front door.
Right, right.
And so, and also I think what was very invaluable about me going to Howard for undergraduate was that I went to a predominantly public white school system in Florida. And I was interviewing for this on-campus organization to become a member. And the director at the time asked me in my interview process, what makes you different? And so I said, well, growing up, I was the only Black kid in my all AP class. So he stopped me immediately. He said, everybody at Howard was the only Black student in their all AP classes. So like, now that you're here, how are you different? And so that forced me to see myself outside of race. And it made me think about, and then even after the conversation, it made me think about, how many people who are not marginalized or not oppressed or not minorities don't see themselves out of race, and they are more competitively advantaged because they don't see themselves through that prism. And so Howard really was really a vehicle for me to understand what my values are and who I am. And that was just so phenomenal. Now I went to a PWI for my master's program at Parsons. And the way in which PWIs, I guess, educate or edify their students are a bit different. But that might not just be on the basis of race, that could be just on the basis of pedagogy. And so I think, but again, at PWIs, I found myself being much more resourceful and much more intentional about what I wanted, rather than it kind of being on display and me just going and grabbing it. So I've learned to be both entrepreneurial in the PWI aspect, but then also being able to know how to be received or allow myself to be received in the HBCU space. And coming to FAMU, it's almost like a microcosm of Howard. I love that, race is not so much a vivid conversation in my mind where I have to feel like I'm different because I am Black. But I also believe that, I believe wholeheartedly that our professors embrace the model of excellence with caring. They are diligent and persistent in showing students how they're going to practice in the real world as law students. So practical experience was something that I was going to evaluate in the admissions process, and realized that when I come out, I want to be a leading attorney. Teach, how do you be a leading attorney? And that's why FAM sold to me.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I went to, like I said, I went to pretty much PWIs, both undergrad and law school, but I went to a majority Black high school. So for me, I thought the opposite. I'm like, the world is not Black. So I need to start putting myself in environments where, I may be the only one and can be comfortable with that. So I almost did the opposite, thinking, okay, I've had kind of like, the diversity experience growing up in DC, having, all the different races around. I had that, but that's not really what corporate America looks like. So for me, it was almost like I forced myself into a PWI setting to see if I could survive, if I could stand it. Which is kind of leads me to my last question for you. And then I know you had a few questions for me. what is your advice? I mean, I know you say everybody has their own journey, but
Mhm.
you know, if there's a Black law student out there listening to this podcast, considering going to law school, what are maybe 2 or 3 tips you would give them in terms of, you know, preparing for law school and or, you know, just choosing a law school?
Right. So first and foremost, apply to an HBCU. Apply to two, Howard and FAMU. Like, just put that out there. And also understand that just because you apply to a certain university does not mean you have to go to that university.
Right, that's
But
true.
I definitely believe that all Black students should apply to HBCUs because it's just, I think that's just the right thing to do. And my lawyer side is saying have a reason, have a justification, but I'm just like, just do it.
Let's do it.
Um, so that's number one. Number two, fundamentally, be in touch with who you are. In law school, you're going to have to, first of all, you're going to need to have a why. That's number one. And number two, you're going to need to be flexible enough to redefine that why, because that first why is not going to take you to the next season of your law school career. So be
Right.
flexible in why you're here, and understand. And if I could tell this to myself before I came to law school, everything that your professors say from the moment you come into law school is correct. You may not like it. You might not want to hear it. You might disagree with it, but it is correct. And if you start to operate from this mindset of they are giving me the best advice because as professionals, as legal professionals, they have to have a good faith basis for saying what they're saying,
Right.
then that'll open you up to the next opportunity behind what they're saying. So, and that'll help you develop that lawyer mind. You have to be open to facts that you might not be aware of, that you might not be inferring. And so if you come in accepting a lot, you'll get a lot out. But if you are more narrow-minded as opposed to narrow-focused, there's a distinction, more narrow-minded about what you're hearing or what you're open to, you might find yourself with more limiting opportunities because there's just so much more behind what people are saying. And I guess my last tip would just be yourself, be confident, understand that I mean, at FAMU, my class was 100 students, 110 students R1L year. COVID had all its constraints on that. But if you come in and you're be yourself, you'd be surprised how many people will see your authenticity and love you for it. And I think authenticity will take you much more, bring you much more and take you much farther than GPA or anything of that matter will. So talent is not GPA. Let's just be very clear.
I have to interrupt him. Part of the reason why I selected him was the personality that literally screamed through Derrick's essay. So there were
Thank
some people
you.
that had higher GPAs, came from different schools. I was like, nope, this is it. This is the person that I'm selecting. So he is proof in the pudding that being authentic can actually take you much further than some of the you would think some of the credentials you think you would have to have. And not to say obviously GPA and all those things are important, but yeah, personality and authenticity will take you
We'll
far.
take, yeah, absolutely. And it'll come through your work product. Believe that. It will.
Definitely, definitely. So I know you had a few questions for me that we'll close out with, and then obviously we always close out with our Black Excellence moment for the week. So I know I'm in the hot seat now. So what questions did you have for me? Now that I know you're kind of similar to me, being interested, I know in entertainment law and some other things. What questions did you have for me?
Right. So, coming out of law school, you were faced with all the pressures that I'm going to be faced with. You, the bar, finding a job, not trying to move back home with your parents, all of that.
Yes.
What would you say, both in terms of motivation, and just in terms of, looking for those opportunities right after undergrad, or I'm sorry, right after law school, that could be a benefit to anyone listening today? If you were to speak to your younger self and
Mhm.
say, look here for opportunity, or define the opportunities that you want by these kinds of values, because every legal environment is different, what would you say?
I would say sooner versus later, figure out where you want to be in the law and not so much the practice area, but like where in terms of the place. So there's big law where you have the big corporate environment. And then you have the small to mid-sized firm environment, right? So you have the firm environment. Decide, do you want to be a big the big corporate law or the small to mid-sized environment. And then I would say, if that's not for you, is in counsel, working for a company. That tends to be entertainment, media related jobs. You work, for Sony or Warner Brothers or Netflix. Like, do you see yourself, in a smaller environment where your only client is the company? Do you see yourself working in the government? Right? There are a lot of attorneys in the government. Is that more your fit? Do you see yourself teaching? Some people never practice. Some people, their calling is teaching. Do you see yourself running your own law firm? Which I don't necessarily suggest doing right out of law school, but I call them social media attorneys. A lot of young attorneys are using social media, to get clients right out of law school, so they're actually able to open their practice. So, do you still see yourself running your own law firm? Where do you see yourself? Because I'll be honest with you, the sooner you can figure that out, the more you can kind of narrow down where your path will be. Because to be quite frank, I had to experience them all before I really figured out where I really wanted to be. So I almost wish I had really figured that out a little earlier. But yeah, I would say figure out where you want to be. And to be honest, the only way to do it is internships and mentors. So if you're not doing internships or associate programs at these big firms, or if you don't have a mentor, you're not doing those things in law school, you're really not gonna know. You're never gonna. I'll never forget my first big firm experience. And I'll go ahead and say it, Sullivan and Cromwell. It was my first big law experience. Very big firm all over the world. Main office was in New York. And, first day in, I was like, oh, wow, we have a convenience store, we've got a gym, we've got a dry cleaners, we've got a chef. I was like, car service. It's in New York. I said car service. I just thought I had hit the jackpot, okay, working there. And then slowly I realized why they gave us so much stuff. They didn't want us to go leave. I didn't get that at first. I figured I had, oh, you don't have to go any, you can just go right downstairs. Just right downstairs. They didn't want us to leave. So when people, talk about the big, firm experience and getting, the big job, which I don't hate them, because if you can cancel your student law debt by working at a big firm for a couple of years and you get an offer, go for it, even if you're not planning to stay. But just understand there is a reason why you have the perks, and there is a reason why your salary is a certain way. They want you to bill an unusual amount of billable hours from the very beginning. You're going to be working 60, maybe 80 hours a week. If that's not your personality, if that's not something you can even stomach, even listening to on this podcast, big law is probably not for you. Maybe you need to do a small to mid-sized firm that, promotes more work-life balance and things like that. So yes, when I laugh, when you're all excited that I'm working at, I'm like, okay, girl, you'll see soon. You'll see soon. I mean, you will collect that check, but you're going to see why you're collecting that check. So yeah, definitely. I think, understanding physically where you think you see yourself and you're most comfortable is something I would tell my younger self to figure that out much sooner. And now, I mean, here's the thing: I'm running my own practice and I teach. So I landed in those two roles. Out of everything that I experienced, I felt the most comfortable teaching, and I felt the most comfortable having my own practice, which again comes with its own challenges. But I make my own schedule. I pick my own clients. I can do what I want. So. At the end of the day, it gives me that freedom, but I feel like I earned that freedom. I had to work for a lot of people before I got to this point. And so, yeah, that would be my advice out the gate.
Right. And I love that entrepreneurialism. Like, it's just this idea that you can be your own boss. You've learned from so much. That's amazing. So this is kind of a two-part question. So sidebar, I'm learning about, how lawyers should conduct themselves, the integrity of the profession, all that good stuff. But I also want to hone in on the fact that, you came out in this world as a young attorney. So how much do you feel like you had to, have this persona that I'm now a professional, I have to conduct myself a certain kind of way. And did that bleed over into your personal relationships with like family and close friends and things of that nature? And then also, like, you know, you earned this law degree, you earned the bar. So when you're talking to people and they're being hard-headed in the conversation, do you flip the I'm a lawyer card? Like, I'm not the girl who I used to be. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so tell me about that.
Well, I will say in terms of answering your question, like how has it kind of changed me personally? You know, after I've become this lawyer, you know, passed the bar, graduated from law school, you know, how has that affected maybe my personal persona or my personal relationships? And the short answer is it will. It will.
Mhm.
I pull the lawyer card all the time. And a lot of times I pull it because I do look young. I am a minority. I'm a woman. When I say I'm a lawyer, I immediately get a certain amount of respect. And people don't talk to me the same way. So that's probably the best part of this struggle of becoming, you know, trying to get through school and all the debt and all that. When you say you're a lawyer, you immediately are positioned a little differently when people are dealing with you and things of that nature. So it's kind of this built-in respect that you get. So yeah, you get to pull the lawyer card a lot. But I try not to pull it to the point where I'm like not obnoxious, right? On the flip side, you know, there are a lot of bad lawyer jokes out of there. Most people think lawyers are liars. We only want to make money and da da da. And here's the thing. I love how you say your why continues to evolve. Do not go to law school because you want to make money. I can give you a whole list of careers, okay, that you can have where you can make money and you do not have to go to law school and spend over $100,000 in debt and be stressing out over taking all multiple, some people have to take multiple bar exams. Like,
Right,
sis, I can give you a whole nother list of careers you can do, and
right.
you can do them in less amount of time and still be making six figures. You have to like to help people. I know
You do.
people will hear that, but that's what lawyers do. Whether you are representing Cardi B, Michael Jordan, Ahmaud Arbery, whoever, from the whole spectrum of different areas of law, you are helping people. You are their representative. So if you don't like to help people and you don't really like people, this is not the career for you. I don't care how much money you think you can make in it. So I think it's also important to know that that should be a big part of your why. You do like helping because you are their representative. So I will say, you know, in your personal life, yes, you know, when you go to law school, I always tell people you're going to think differently, you're going to talk differently. You can literally go from high school to law school. There's nothing in college that prepares you for law school. Nobody wants to believe you, but it's true. You're literally, they literally teach you how to do everything over. Think, write, read. It's a different process. So no, you're not going to be the same person when you come out of law school. Don't be obnoxious with it, but no, you're not going to be the same person. You know, you have leveled up in terms of you know, this is not a job. This is a career and a profession. And so I say use it to your advantage, whether it's demanding respect from people that may not respect you out the gate, but also just really helping people that maybe you wouldn't necessarily been able to help if you weren't attorney. I will say be careful with family. Like, you know, I'm always like, I don't do criminal law, so don't ask me to get juju out, you know, off bail. Like I will refer you out in a
Right.
minute. I will say
I'm
be
an attorney,
careful
but
with
I'm
that.
not your attorney.
Exactly. Be very careful with that. That's a tip that sometimes family just think that you are now their own call attorney. No, you are not. Unless they retain you, unless that's your specialty, you know, don't get caught up, you know, thinking you can help and then it doesn't work out and then they're complaining, right? And don't do that with people who you think your friends are either. You don't want to get a bar complaint that, oh, this lawyer said that they could help me and they didn't help me, or the case didn't turn out the way I wanted it to because you thought maybe you could help them out. Don't feel compelled. Don't feel compelled. So that's my advice as it relates to, you know, in your personal relationships, how it will look coming out of law school and passing the bar.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I can go on and on, but my last question is going to be, I'm going to give you a phrase and I want you to tell me, I want you to build off of it. I want you to give me
Okay.
some context, some depth. But I want you to hear it first.
Okay.
Vote for yourself.
Mhm. Okay. So finish, build off that.
Yeah.
Okay. Vote for yourself because if you don't, no one else will. No one else will. I think even just deciding to go to law school is voting for yourself. You know, this is definitely the path less taken. This is not the journey of this is not for people that have thin skin. Like you said, you know, your teachers are right. Just come in with that mindset. Like I think choosing to go to law school is definitely a vote for yourself, and it's a vote for your family. I mean, at the end of the day, you can make a lot of money and you can help a lot of people. In fact, the legal career is one of the few careers where there's no cap really on how much you can make.
This is true.
It's no cap that says you can only make X. No, there's really no cap, especially when you go into private practice. You can make literally as much as you want. And so, you know, being in a profession that literally helps people, I feel like, yeah, you choosing to go to law school is a vote for yourself. It's a vote for your family. It's a vote for your community. I think even if you know, some people say, oh, you did entertainment law. You know, my mother was like, I want you to represent Jay-Z. I'm like, why are you worried about me representing Jay-Z? Like, first of all, I can represent Jay-Z. You know, Beyonce is my cousin being married. You know, she a Cardinal. So, you know, that would be a one up for me. What are you talking about? You know, but I think for her, lawyer, she wanted me in the suit, in the office with the four white walls of the computer. You know, that's what people think lawyers are. Like, they're probably not Black, they're probably not women. And even if they are, they should just be kind of in this very structured environment. And my goal with this podcast, my goal with some of the other organizations that I'm a part of, is to break that stereotype that someone like me can be, you know, in this profession, someone like you can be in this profession. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that you say vote for yourself, because like, I'm now in a position to help people like Ahmaud Arbery's family, which you wouldn't even think someone that is in my area would do that, but his brand is being violated. So I am their IP attorney, right? So I am helping his brand even while he is gone. I'm keeping his legacy alive by protecting his trademarks and his likeness and things like that. So you just never know where this journey will take you by deciding to choose to become an attorney. So if this is something you want to do, don't let anyone stop you. And don't, like you said, don't let the fact that, oh, it's a lot of debt. Don't let that stop you. Eventually you'll pay it off. Don't worry about that. But as long as you pay your little minimum every month,
exactly.
You're fine. Right.
Work in the public interest and you for 10 years and it'll be waived.
Right. It's not that big of a deal. Don't let that stop you. Don't let some of these other things stop you, because you just never know with you becoming an attorney who you can really help, even just obviously beyond your self. But yes, thank you for those questions. Like I said, I'm so used to interviewing people. I rarely get interviewed, so I'm always like, oh Lord, what is somebody gonna ask me? Because I'm always on the other end of knowing what I'm gonna ask and how I would respond. So I love your questions. Definitely unexpected, but definitely a treat. With that being said, our Black Excellence moment, oh my God, it's so funny because I did not know you went to Howard undergrad. Our Black Excellence moment has to actually do with Howard University this week. So our Black Excellence moment, Netflix, who we were talking about earlier, actually is giving $5.4 million to Howard in the name of Chadwick Boseman. Yes, HU big ups. For our audience, if you didn't know, that's where he attended. And I think they renamed the Fine Arts Department after him. That's where my sister attended. And I actually got into Howard undergrad and law school. And I think because I'm somehow on a donor list. I don't know how it happens. I still get a notice like from Howard. I'm like, I got
it. You're there in spirit. You're there. Your degree conferred in spirit.
HU is in my heart. It was right across the street from Banneker, where I went to high school. I was up on the yard, So
Georgia Ave, the memories.
I'm HU in heart. I didn't go, but I got in. I hope to donate. Maybe I hope to teach one day. So I'm all about the HBCU experience. So I love that you encouraged our viewers or listeners that are thinking about going to law school to definitely make sure that HBCUs are on their list of places to attend. So yeah, that's our Black Excellence moment for the week. So big up to Netflix for the donation to Howard and on behalf of Chadwick Boseman. It's been a pleasure, Derrick, speaking. Like I said, we could talk all day. I hope to one day fly you out to fabulous LA. I know you've had the fabulous New York experience, and I know you're back in Florida for school, but we definitely got to get your fabulousness out here to LA.
I was contemplating taking the California bar, so who knows?
Yes, yes, yes. I definitely think you would do well out here in LA. With that being said, it was a pleasure speaking to you. I love that you're a part of our season 1. And yes, we're here at the Black Lawyer Podcast, where we're rooting for everyone Black. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next episode.